I'll fully admit the Trump administration has admitted that there was a processing error. Too late to do anything about it now. It's regrettable.
Should they stop doing what they're doing, not keep providing people due process?
Yeah, but if they do it again, it'll be regrettable.
So you must have a big problem with all the Justice Department shit that's happening right now under the Trump administration version too, right? Where Trump is bringing people into the Oval Office to sign off criminal investigations himself directly into, for example, Chris Krebs. You think that you're fine with that? You're cool with that?
Now that you bring it up, I do. Yeah. I actually have a big
It's regrettable. So are you okay with what happened? Then I'll ask the Mayor Adams.
I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Was it bad at all?
It's about 1/1000. What we're talking about.
Is it not bad at all? I want to know that. That's why I'm asking the question more directly.
Sure, it's slightly bad.
Okay.
Right now, you're being bad faith.
Why?
And you know it. You want to know how I know?
Why?
So I never criticized Trump's Alien Enemy Act position.
Oh wait, no, you did. You said that it was bad. I think you did say that they should be given due process. Yeah.
Well, that is easy. As I said previously to you, although there may be legal justifications, for example, maybe it turns out that he did lie on his visa application. I think it, to me, feels like he was specifically targeted because he said harsh things about Israel. I think that it's targeting that's unacceptable.
Okay.
I think that the idea that we target people based on criticism of Israel is unacceptable.
Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
Like, to be honest, I don't know. I don't mind talking stuff like the immigration stuff and stuff like that. That's fine. I already talked to you about some of that. I think your take on Garcia's dog shit. I don't mind debating that.
Really?
Because, well, let me ask you this. Do you think he was deported under the Alien Enemy Act?
No, he wasn't.
Right. That's what I thought from the get-go, but a lot of people were mistaken. So for me, it's just like, when you're talking to Will Chamberlain, you're like, well, you admit that it's illegal. Well, yeah, the government already did.
Yeah, no, but you say you don't care. So your response is like, but I don't care about that.
Well, that's partially it, and I certainly don't. I feel that we should not accept any withholding claims or asylum claims, period, because of the obvious...
Even if it's illegal?
Well, hear me out. Because of the intention of people like you and those you support that want the country overflowed. And so you understand that if we went through this process, it would take thousands of years to deport 12 million people because each person will... For example, with the withholding claim of Garcia, we were 4 years on from when... Or actually more than that, 6 years on from 2019. When he filed it. So the process would be insane to deport people. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface. For example, even
if it's illegal, you would suspend all asylum even if it's illegal?
I think that I would prefer that Congress vote to will no longer.
Yeah, but would you do it even if it's illegal?
If I'm the Trump administration?
Yeah.
I would kick out everyone that's illegal first.
No, but would you suspend asylum and withholding even if it were illegal to do so?
I wouldn't do so until we get to that point, which is probably years away. And then I would pressure Congress. But ultimately, I would probably not be for Trump just saying F it. Though I'm debating, I could be talked into it.
You could be talked into it. Okay, good. Sorry.
Let me ask you a question, right?
Yeah.
Do you think this guy still has reasonable fear of the Barrio 18 gang?
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Okay, well, if I could argue, if he comes back...
I can explain if you want.
Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to say this. Yeah. Assuming that you do, if he comes back, we give him a hearing. Mm-hmm. Hearing takes 1 day. Barrio 18 doesn't exist anymore. Now we could send him to El Salvador?
So no, because he could press another defensive claim. So he could, just like the government could come up and say, hey, change country conditions, he would have the due process to also provide a new basis for withholding or a convention against torture. And I think he'd have pretty strong arguments.
Well, okay, two things. One, why would he not have had to make those arguments as they came up?
Because they're new. Just because there's new country conditions, there are new bases to claim withholding or a convention against torture that have arisen in part because of this entire dramatic proceeding. So I think that
what do you think? What reasonably do you think would his new fear be if that gang doesn't exist?
Yeah. Well, one is I don't think the gang doesn't exist. I think they're largely curtailed. But here would I think he has a stronger persecution claim because the government of El Salvador has indicated publicly that this person is in fact a member of MS-13, is a terrorist that they intend to put in prison for a long time. That's an even stronger claim of persecution as against the government. Number one, especially if you're able to prove that it's political based on, and it's not based on anything substantive. It's based in fact on this relationship with the Trump administration, and he's in fact being treated as a political prisoner. That's a stronger on all fours claim of persecution or convention against torture, which he's not ineligible for, as against the government of El Salvador, which is even more direct than as against the gang, the 18th Street gang.
Right, and that's the admission I wanted. The truth is that anytime we ever tried to...
I'm not done. The other one is if he's going to be put in Cenk, the fact that he's such a prominent person now puts a target on his back, especially either if he's put into Cenk where all these gang members are, or if he's just on the street. It's not like he's just some normal person. Now the whole world and the country knows about of Kilmar Garcia. And so I think he has stronger Convention Against Torture and withholding claims now that the Trump administration has done what they've done.
Real quick, on that second claim, couldn't you make that about any country in the world?
No.
Why not? You don't think they know who he is in Guatemala, in France, in the UK?
No, because...
In Canada?
No.
Someone could attack him. He's prominent. Any MAGA populist type person around the world now could attack him if he's deported to any country.
No, I think because you have to link to the government action or inaction, and so in the case of
claim two is no separate from claim one.
No. So it is separate because one is based on government inaction and their willingness to abide stuff. So that's the connective tissue, and the other is government action, and where it doesn't really matter if he's threatened by the gangs or not.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree with your premise that section 1 isn't government inaction, because you're saying the problem would be government action would mean they would politically put him in C-cut. So that's government action, not inaction.
Right.
Two's just, and other people might treat him harshly because he's famous.
No, and the government is willing to abide it and not do anything about it, and that's his initial withholding claim. Wait.
The overarching point is literally, and the truth is, and you will never admit this, and I understand why not, because you're a NIMBY person. You've defended.
I'm not
Martha's
NIMBY.
Vineyard.
Stop.
You are. You defended Martha's. Just so everyone knows.
All right. Let's not derail, but go ahead. Make your point. Your NIMBY point.
One of the wealthiest communities in this country, when they
make your point.
50 illegals, 50, and can only hold them for 48 hours. Pisco's argument was, perhaps they didn't have the resources.
So you can't distinguish between a government. So just be aware, there are governments with very rich people in them. The governments themselves are poor, even though the citizens are rich. You agree with that?
Yes, I agree that could be the case.
Got it. Go ahead.
It's quite clear that that's not the situation in Martha's Vineyard.
Go ahead.
It's one of the wealthiest communities. They could have put up with these people for more than 48 hours. And Pisco.
Finish your point. I'm a NIMBY, and therefore, what's your broader point?
So it's clear that you and the people you cheer for want these millions of people to stay. You were okay with the asylum process being abused. You know full well that USAID was funding NGOs that were telling these asylum applicants exactly what to say, and they want to drag out the process to ensure that in this. So
would you be willing to break the law to get your deportation in preferred in place? You're not sure if you'd be willing to break the law. So, but here's the problem with that, Rob. So here's my humongous problem with that. So much of the consternation with illegal immigration is the fact that it is illegal, right? People are like, we're fine with immigration, they just have to do it the legal way. But if what you're saying and suggesting is, there's so much illegal immigration, and we're willing to do illegal things in response to it, then that kind of premise of, the problem is the whole illegality of it, it doesn't seem to be a concern. Well, I think if you're going to premise, that we're willing to break the law to get all these people out, I think you need to premise everything on economic or racial or ethnic solidarity or something like that. But I don't think.
I don't have to premise on illegality. I've already given my argument on that. And what I'm saying is, you can't defend the position reasonably that you don't actually want all of these people here. And that's true of the Democrats as well. They wanted all these people here.
It seems like it's not relevant to what we're willing to do about it, right?
Well, it is. It's exactly relevant to what we're talking about here. So you and all the Democrats lied going into the 2024 election when you realized the public was massively against you. So you claimed to be for, trust us, Kamala or Joe Biden when he was running. They're for border security. You knew that wasn't the case. You knew that they intentionally let these people in, and you were happy with it.
So I disagree. I disagree with both those premises, just to be clear.
Well, that seems to be evident. And so now the whole game is, we're going to ensure that the process is drug out ad infinitum. Because now every single person that's getting sent back to El Salvador, you would say, well, wait a minute, they have a reasonable claim of fear, C-cuts like this torturous prison. And because it's now been made a political issue, they'll say, just like Garcia could say, can't send them to El Salvador. Then if I ask you the next question, okay, well, there's already a deportation order for Garcia. Can we send him to Guatemala?
Answer is no. Why do you think the answer is no? The removal order pertains to a particular country. You agree with that?
No, the removal order wasn't just El Salvador.
Yes, it was.
The deportation order was to deport him out of the country.
No. Why do you think you know that?
Because of what I've read?
No, it's not the case. So they're wrong. So the removal order is to a specific country. You can't just say it's not a general removal order. It's a removal order to El Salvador.
I would have to look into this.
Okay, yeah, you do that.
I disagree with you.
You disagree with me on that, on whether or not removal orders specify a country.
Yes,
okay,
I disagree.
Cool.
I disagree. I think that it was I think that the way this works is these deportation orders are in general to deport, right? The default is to country of origin, But just because there's then
You don't actually know, right? Just to be clear.
You don't either. I've seen you get blown out by Good Logic and other people misrepresenting.
Blown out Good Logic on what? Good Logic gets crushed every time he talks to me. Are you kidding me?
He does not. He does
yes,
not.
He does. 100% he does.
He blew you the out on Tim Pool's show.
Are you kidding me? You mean? Wait, are you serious? What part of that conversation?
Like the entire part of the conversation when he got to talk, Tim wasn't speaking over him. So the 10 to 15% when Good Logic got to talk.
Yeah, if there's a specific part.
Which is why you redirected to Tim, because you knew you were getting blown out by Good Logic.
No. So first of all, that is completely untrue. So I definitely will pivot and use people against each other. I think it's an awesome thing to do in these contexts, and I think actually being outnumbered is an advantage. And I 100% admit that I will sometimes use them against each other, but I use both of them against each other. So I go to Good Logic and say, "Isn't that crazy what Tim said?" And I go to Tim to say, "Isn't that crazy what Good Logic says?" But in general, I have complete confidence in every single position that I was saying in Tim Pool, and I would defend every single thing I said on that on Tim Pool's. I would defend it now.
You can defend it, but I'm telling you, you got blown out.
No, what? Name one thing I got blown out on. Name one thing.
I would happily go through point by point.
100%. No, we should do a stream on that, and we go point by point.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. We'll set that up at some point.
Yeah. Let's do it.
But the truth is, I don't know. It's entirely possible that you're correct that the deportation order. So you're saying all deportation orders ever are only one specific country.
They specify the location of deportation. That's correct.
So a deportation order, if it specifies this guy gets deported to Mexico, and then a judge years later says a withholding order from Mexico, the deportation doesn't stand that he could be deported to Sweden.
So the deportation order would not be good for Sweden. No. Now he's conceded removability, right? So in the process of doing this, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, like many of these petitioners defensively, will concede removability, but that's just step one of the process. Once you can, so I concede Kilmar is at step one removable, but he could be eligible for forms of relief to prevent him from being removed. One thing he can do is he can claim adjustment of status, he can claim Convention Against Torture, he can claim withholding. And the reason you have to specify which country you're trying to remove him to is because your argument defensively could be different depending on the country, right? So if you're a gay person and you're claiming Convention Against Torture because you're going to be sent back to Jamaica, which is a highly homophobic society, right? Or to like Saudi Arabia, right? It might be a completely different defensive claim for withholding, for...
that I agree with. I'm misunderstanding then what your point is. Right, I would agree. They would officially have to say, okay, we're deporting you to Guatemala. And
so you can raise claims and say, no, you can't do that there because X.
But the removability, the deportability is already in effect.
There
is no claim for, let me finish. There's no claim. He's already been said, you're an illegal, you're out of the country. It's just then he raised the position after his asylum failed. He raised the position, but I can't go back to because when I was 15, there was this gang back in 2011, 8 years ago, that I was fearful of. So now 6 years on from that, I'm still fearful of this gang from when I was 15. So you can't send me to this place. I think that he should come back. I hope that they do something like this. Bring him back immediately, prove that he's a member of MS-13, send him back to El Salvador. Or if not that, immediately prove that he's not in fear of the Barrio gang, send him back to El Salvador. Or send him to Rwanda or some shit.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Rob. Here's the problem. The Trump administration immigration judge in 2019, he's the one who granted the withholding. He's the one who gave the working permit. So do you really believe it?
You constantly do this. Trump appointed bad people. I'm sure he appointed bad judges too.
No. The point is the following. I don't think these people have the actual courage of their conviction. This guy's an MS-13 member, and the proof's in the pudding. They're lying about things constantly. They're just and pretending as though like determinations made in a bond hearing are res judicata, or that they have binding legal precedent, or that they're there's something we should adhere to. And they're bad faith about it too. Like even assuming that this were the standard that because a court said it, right? That any Trumper would say because a court said it, we agree with it. It's just ridiculous.
Well, there's a court has adjudicated, a judge has said through some level there's suspicion that he's MS-13. The question then becomes the same time I talked to you last time under the Alien Enemies Act. What is the level of proof necessary? What is this
isn't under the Alien Enemies Act. This is under this is actually a completely lawless deportation, presumably under the INA. But
but that's why the claim of MS-13 is irrelevant to this entire thing.
Well, I agree it's irrelevant, which is why I'm like, you can say you don't care, but here's the problem, right? If you put any one of these big holes in due process, the government's just going to argue that you fit into one of the due process holes. And the due process is like what good is the First Amendment? What good is any of our rights if there's not a process? Like let's say you have the first. Yeah.
Pisco, I don't take you seriously on this because one, I've already said that I understand that the process is to gum up the works. Literally every single illegal, you'd be like, well, he can make a withholding claim about that country because it's political.
That's the law.
Right. So in other words, you're acknowledging, in your honest opinion, if people got the due process which you think is necessary, how many people in 4 years do you think, given the time it would take to give them all of that due process, how many people reasonably do you think, if all of them failed?
If they really wanted to, millions.
Really?
Yes. I mean,
Right, so
Obama deported hundreds of so there are hundreds of thousands of deportations a year. If the Trump administration wanted to put $1 trillion into deportations, they could deport 3 or 4 million people.
Okay, how long should a person get to prepare their sort of case? So like, let's see,
for a merits hearing?
Like withholding, right.
Yeah, so for a merits hearing for asylum or withholding, I think that, yeah, if you could do it, what Biden wanted to do is have it done in a couple months. I think that's fine. Yeah, let's do it in a few months.
Let's say 2 months, right? So each of those hearings, how many cases do you think a judge could hear a day?
Yeah, so an immigration judge probably at most could hear 2.
2 a day. Okay, so let's say 12 million people that we're trying to deport. 2 months prep at minimum for each person, right? A judge could hear 2 a day. So you said millions. How many judges do we have now that are hearing these types
I don't know the stats on that. Sorry.
Do you have a ballpark? Is it like 1,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Let me check UIR number of judges.
My guess is it's not.
There are more than 700 immigration judges.
Okay, so let's say 1,000. We'll round up, right? 1,000. They could hear 2 a day. How many days would we need to get to 12 million?
Let's see. Let's do the math, right? So if every judge do 1,000, so do 2,000 times 365. Yeah, so in a year you get 730,000.
Okay, so we're talking 16, 17 years.
Yeah, but no, but you need to get more immigration judges.
Okay, so
pay for more immigration judges. Yeah, if you want to do mass deportation, you're going to need to get more judges. So get, I don't know.
Where are the judges coming from? We just hire them up. Can I be an immigration judge?
Yeah, hire and train them. What do you think this is like? Would you ever say? Would you wait, Rob? To be clear, would you ever say this of like the criminal process, where like all of a sudden, if you had 10 to 15% more people wanting criminal trials as opposed to pleading out, you'd be like, oh, okay, I guess we can't do it. We just have to throw them in jail without a trial. No,
yes,
you wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't say that. What you would say is there's a certain point where the system is broken to the point where the next time that your guy gets in office, he's going to leave 15 million in again. And it's going to take us 16 years to get back to the status quo. That at some point you have to say the process is broken.
So would you break the law in this context right now? Okay.
No, I wouldn't right now. I already explained to you what I would do.
That's good.
Right? So I already explained to you what I would do. But the truth is that you're better. And I know you don't give a shit about due process, because in some of the most egregious violations of these sorts of things, what did you say when the FBI legally spied on Trump's campaign?
It was wrong. They shouldn't do it again.
No. What you said was it's regrettable.
Yeah, I haven't seen. You've said that, right?
So then my position on Garcia and these other 12 million people is send them all out immediately, and then we'll go. Shucks, it's regrettable. Fair enough,
but hang on a second. So I actually believe it's wrong to have circumvented some of the FISA norms. I actually believe that that's completely wrong.
Cool.
And it shouldn't. And it shouldn't happen again. Wait. Are you willing to say that this kind of shit shouldn't happen again?
I'll answer you in a second. Yeah. You know what happened earlier today? I got a lemon Oreo. My wife bought these lemon Oreos. And I had one for me and one for her and one for my son. And I went to leave my dog out. And guess what? My son ate his and mine. Will you admit that's wrong?
Yeah, I guess it's wrong.
Wow. Me too. See?
Yeah, I don't understand.
It was wrong.
Wait,
the way you said that the FISA warrants and all that bullshit against Trump was wrong, you were like, yeah, it's regrettable.
What more things do you want me to do? Wait. What more action do you want me to do?
I'll fully admit.
Wait, what more action?
Trump administration. Listen, I'll fully admit the Trump administration has admitted that there was a processing error. Too late to do anything about it now. It's regrettable.
Should they stop doing what they're doing, not providing people due process?
Yeah, but if they do it again, it'll be regrettable.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? I actually think that they should stop doing what they did with the Carter Page warrants.
Nah, you didn't give a shit.
No, wait.
You're saying it to cover your ass.
Just to be clear. No, wait. What do you mean? What do you mean I denied it at the time? What do you mean I denied it?
The very first time.
What do you mean by the phrase "I denied it at the time"? What did you mean by that?
Listen to me. I'm telling you. The very first time I ever talked to you about this, I asked a simple question: should the FBI have to attempt to verify evidence before using it to get a FISA warrant?
It depends what you mean. It depends what you mean.
And you went off for 10 minutes. You couldn't say.
Yeah, so I don't take your representation in that conversation. But to be clear, I stand by the notion that depends what you mean by verify. Verify to what percentage? And you agree with that?
Yes, attempt to verify. You couldn't say that at the time.
Yeah. So just to be clear, we agree that it depends on what you mean by verify. But just hang on a second. So yeah, you should do something, but it depends on what that something is. And I want to be clear right now. I think that what happened in the Carter Page situation was wrong, and they shouldn't do it again. And when I say it, I'm not just being like tongue in cheek about it. I do think it was wrong. But you can't say it with that emphatic voice that, yeah, it was wrong for Trump to do that and they should not do it again in that voice, because you don't actually believe it. You don't really think it's that big.
Not only will I say it was wrong, the Trump administration's admitted it's wrong. And I think it's regrettable. And if they do it 12 million more times, I'll say that was wrong. It's regrettable.
Wait a second. Wait 1 second here. So with respect to the broken warrant process, bad FISA warrant process, what happened with the Carter Page warrants, there should be corrective measures taken. And if there's criminal action, if there was criminal conduct, it should be looked into. But here's the problem there, Rob. If there were continued serial violations of the FISA process, wouldn't you it would start to escalate in terms of what the remedies would be? But it seems but
no, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
It wouldn't, and you would have been totally fine with it.
Oh,
For
gosh.
example, you are aware that the IG looked at like 12 other cases. Each one of them were found to have FISA violations. Correct.
What other 12? I don't know what specific part of the IG report you're talking about, so I can't claim to it. Yeah.
The IG looked at other cases that weren't connected to Trump or anything like that, and found that there was violations of the Wood procedures and other things that occurred in each of them.
Yeah. They had major reforms after the Carter Page situation.
So explain some of the reforms.
Yeah. So for example, instead of being able to have it be signed off by a lower than FBI level, director level, now every single one of them, I believe, needs to be signed off with the FBI's direct knowledge. The directors.
But the FBI directly signed off on the Carter Page one, right?
So it was the deputy. I think it was the deputy at that point, and he wasn't super involved in the process. And so, as I understand it, the reforms are designed and tailored such that the FBI director.
Signed off. I thought Comey signed off on the warrant.
Comey himself did not directly sign off on the warrant.
So now you're saying Patel would have to sign off.
Yeah, I think these days now, one of the reforms they did was to have higher senior level. I believe that one of the ways that senior level staff members are more involved in the process in some way. In addition, I think that there's
the reforms are bullshit. We all know it.
Okay, well, how do you know? How do you know they're bullshit?
Because
explain that. How do you know?
No one has been held to account for.
How do you know they're bullshit? You said something. You said the new procedures are bullshit. How do you know?
Yes. Well, how would you know what I know if you don't let me answer?
Yeah. But you start talking about criminal process.
Because the biggest political scandal in the history of our country was cheered on at the time by the entirety of the Democratic Party, including you, and it was basically no one was held to any sort of serious account, up to and including the only criminal conviction of this with Kevin Kleinsmith, a person who had put #resist and talked about the need to resist Trump, who changed evidence in order to make it more likely to be able to spy.
How do you know the new procedures are bullshit?
What I know is he wasn't held.
How do you know the new procedures are bullshit?
And I know that procedures won't change.
Do you or do you not know the new procedures are bullshit?
I know the new procedures are bullshit because Durham said that no change in procedure would make any difference unless it was a massive.
Oh, okay. All right. So basically what you're saying and suggesting is that the procedures themselves, you don't really know them, you can't really speak to them, but you know they're bullshit and garbage because the FBI is just so Durham with so Durham with respect to talking about like whether the culture of the organization, you can't change the culture, and so no procedure is gonna fit against like culture that's constantly confirming biases, constantly, if it were, Durham did not find any political bias, but if there is political bias, obviously procedure is not going to save you necessarily there. On that point, I think there's about enough.
That's not what Durham said.
No, wait. So Durham made clear that, procedure can only help you so much, right? Procedure, if what you really have are systemic confirmation bias, that kind of thing, it's not going to help you out. But again, that's neither here nor there to our conversation.
It's weird. It's weird. Like, what I always find weird about you is that how easy would it be if you bite the bullet and say this? Yeah, you're right. That's what Durham said. But I disagree with him. But instead, what you do is you speak like in half of what he said in half of hypothetical. Well, he did admit if there was some bias, well, then changing.
No, but you said the new procedures were bullshit.
Let me finish. Then the next thing he admits is, and we have that bias.
Wait a second. So to be clear, you said the new procedures were bullshit.
Correct.
And instead, so now you're saying, well, there are some things against which the new procedures can't help, but that doesn't mean that new procedures are bullshit. You know that, right?
The new procedures of I no longer accept people that we see that committed the greatest political scandal in the history of our country on their word of, trust us, bro, this whole procedure's fixed after the blatant egregious. Most of the people promoted upwards, if not within the agency, within the Democratic apparatus culturally, right? Like James Comey. Sure, he's let go. But
more generalities, trying to move off of the procedures. You're saying because the procedures can't guard against every single thing, you say they're bullshit.
It has nothing to do with generalities. When I get to the specifics and say the guy that investigated said that there was such a biased culture there that procedures being changed wouldn't work. Your response to that is, well, he did say if there was bias.
No. This is the problem with what you're doing, and you're getting antsy because you know I'm identifying it. Here's the problem. I'm identifying it. I'm identifying it very clearly. Just because certain sets of procedures wouldn't guard against some things doesn't mean that the procedures are bullshit. Agreed?
That's not what.
Agreed? Yes or no?
The statement.
Agreed?
You said,
yes or no? Okay, cool.
Yes, I agree. Will you agree that's not what Durham said?
What?
Yes or no?
Wait. What statement? What statement? What statement? What statement? What statement?
No. Agree? Yes or no?
What statement?
Stop settling.
What statement? What statement? What statement?
You're getting antsy.
What statement?
What statement? You're getting agreed.
What statement? I don't know what statement.
Agreed? Yes or no?
Well, you know what statement I was talking about.
Yes or no?
You know what statement. So what statement are you talking about?
Yes, I do know. Agreed? Yes or no?
What statement? What statement?
Why do you always do this? Why do you always?
Look at how antsy he is, folks. Look at how antsy. What statement do you want me to? What statement do you want me to say that Durham agreed with or not? I don't know what statement.
You always demand people answer yes or no, and you never can do it yourself ever.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
The last time I had a conversation with you, and I said something like,
"You are
if an officer
piping mad.
drugs."
You're piping mad. So now you're going back to a conversation. So just to be clear, you don't want to address this conversation. You want to move on and go to a different topic.
No. What I'm doing is further highlighting the point that shows
you're attacking me, the person, as opposed to the arguments, like you always do.
What I'm doing is showing the pattern of your behavior.
Yeah, is that relevant? Is the pattern of my behavior relevant?
That is very.
I didn't know that my character was at issue right now. I thought we were talking about actual things.
If we're talking about a pattern of your behavior.
That's not what I thought we were talking about. I thought we were talking about procedures and corruption. Yeah, so you're turning every conversation into me and I'm hypocritical. Pretty sketchy stuff here, Rob.
That's pretty antsy. You're getting pretty antsy there because you know you can't defend it.
You're changing the topic.
I'm not changing the topic.
You're putting my character in issue.
What I'm putting in is to the character of the fact that you're unwilling to.
Yeah, you are. You're putting my character in issue. That's not the topic we're talking about.
I'm saying that you asked me. Imagine if you said answer yes or no, and I was like, no, I'm not answering. I'm not. You would say, why can't you? This is ridiculous. Then when I turn the same question to you and you can't, and I say this is ridiculous. This is a pattern of what you do. You go, that's not the topic.
Well, hang on a second. So it is not the topic. Wait, I'm correct. I'm correct. It is not the topic.
Historically, you never can.
So it is not the topic. I'm correct about that, right?
No, it is the topic.
Okay. All right. So
can you tell me, what was the topic we agreed to talk about? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it wasn't what we were just talking about, which I take to be the topic. It wasn't what we were just talking about, which I take to be the topic. It wasn't what we were just talking about. It wasn't what we were just talking about, which I take to be the topic. What we were just talking about. So it's not the topic we were talking about, which I take to be the thing that we were just discussing. So I think it was not the topic because we were just talking about something else, and you pivoted. What we were just talking about was the same thing we always talk about, Rob, which is the fucking Russiagate situation. Every single conversation goes down to this.
You admit when you're talking about Garcia, that's off topic. You admit that?
No, of course not.
What was the topic again? You want me to bring up the DMs?
Yeah, so the topic that we were just talking about, it was off topic, right? So compared to what we were just talking about.
What was the topic?
Wait. I'm happy to say yes. Wait. The Garcia case was different than the Garcia case was different. The Garcia case was a different topic than what I brought you on to discuss, which is logistics. It is true.
So you were off topic.
So it was a different topic, just like what you just said. I just did. Wait, I just did. You just didn't though, right? You didn't. So I did. Yes. When I brought you on to talk about logistics, when I brought up Ibarra Garcia in those cases, it was a different topic. But you're right now. Would you agree? It was a different topic, right?
I know you're framing. You're saying different topic. I'm saying, was it off topic?
I take different topic and off topic to be the same thing.
Okay, so you admit it was off topic.
Yeah, it's off topic and different topic, just like yours is, right?
Sure.
Wait, do you agree that yours? Wait, so it was off the topic of what we were here to talk about. Do you agree that what you just did, putting my character in issue, is also off topic?
I refuse to answer the yes. No.
Bro, why do you get so squirmy and squirrely when you talk to me?
What is this squirmy? What is this squirmy?
Yeah, because you're unwilling.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, it's off topic. What I just said was off topic.
Why are you?
Yeah. What I just said was off topic.
Right.
Wait, but you won't. But you won't admit it, right? You won't.
You can't.
But you won't admit it. I'd rather talk about the topic, but you won't.
I know it's your spaces. Right? That's fine. If you want to filibuster, that's fine.
What's the filibuster?
My question is, will you admit then you can't deal with the topic at hand, so you had to make it about my character?
Which topic? No. I can totally deal with the topic at hand being
the
Russiagate
investigation. Why did you go off topic about my character?
Because it was fun in that context, and the conversation is devolving.
Do you think that
it's not being productive? It's not productive anymore because you're spazzing out.
That's right, Pisco.
You're spazzing out.
Right, Pisco. That's my entire argument. Me having a conversation with you isn't productive because you always engage in this behavior where you demand other people answer yes, no's, and things like that, and trying to control the conversation. And
it was productive, Rob. What we were just doing was productive.
You do this as well. You have to interrupt. You have to. Right?
Go ahead.
So then when someone says, I will answer your yes, no, now I have a yes, no for you, you never can answer.
I do.
There is a history of it. And then when I bring that up, instead of defending and saying, wait a minute, you say, that's addressing my character. The reason that the character portion of this is relevant to the discussion is because it's indicative of how bad faith you're being during this and other
Whether I'm being bad faith or not isn't the issue of the debate. The issue of the debate, as I understood it, was the merits of the Russia stuff. No, but that was in response to you. Don't be that was in response to you. That was in response to you. You know that, bro.
Just like mine was in response to you. You asked me a yes no question. I answered quickly. I asked you one. You refused.
No, hang on. First of all, I was asking for clarification on what you meant. I genuinely didn't know which statement you were asking me to represent. That.
Of course you did.
No, I did not. No, I did not.
Yes,
okay, so now you're a moderator. So now you're a moderator.
The argument. What do you think the yes no question when I said is that?
I have no idea.
You have no clue.
Yeah, so it might have been the statement related to whether or not it's possible for something to the bullshit situation. But I didn't think it was that because the bullshit, those were terms that I had just invented. So I didn't think that you were asking about that. So I didn't know actually what you were getting at. I actually didn't know what you were getting at. So my representation of something that I put to you was done in my words. It included an insult. It included like bullshit. I didn't think that you were referring to that, and so I actually didn't know what you were referring to. That's why I asked the question.
So I'll re-clarify, and then we'll see if you can answer a yes.
Yeah,
no.
Go for it.
You said something to the effect of answer yes, no. Just because some policies might not be able to reform doesn't mean that others couldn't.
Just because doesn't mean that those policies are bullshit, right? Just because it can't defend against every single thing doesn't mean that those policies are bullshit.
Okay, and I answered yes to that
that's correct.
question. You're right. That would be that. But that's not what Durham said. Will you admit that?
So I don't know what you're representing. Whether it's representing. Wait. Let me tell you the confusion there. I don't know if you're representing the question I asked, which is kind of weird that you would ask whether Durham would ask that because I don't know why that would come up. I'm sure it's not something that he would talk about. It's kind of like an ethical thing. And you might have also been referring to your answer there in that question. You admit that's ambiguous, at least between those two. And so I had no idea what you were talking about.
What you're doing, did Durham say that no policy procedures would matter because of the culture at the FBI? Yes or no?
I don't know if he said it in those terms. I don't know.
Did he basically allude to that?
He alluded to the procedures not being able to defend against every possible thing.
Right. So then your hypothetical of, well, would you admit that changing some procedures just because there's a bad culture wouldn't mean that those procedures wouldn't have any possible benefit? That's when we're talking.
I didn't ask that.
Saying that in reference, my entire criticism of your projection of Durham was this. You're like, well, what Durham said is, yes, of course, if there was this bad culture, then yes, just changing these programs wouldn't stop that bad culture from doing things. And I'm like, right, but that's not what he said. You're making it sound, yes, he did say that, that's part of it, Well, you're leaving out the part that he said.
I'm not representing Durham's. I don't know.
Let me finish. Almost done. You're leaving out the part that that's exactly what Durham said we have. Can you lay out the hypothetical and mislead the audience into that's exactly what Durham said, that we have this culture. Now, I don't remember you at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember you going, holy shit. An investigator said that the culture was so bad. And my God, look at the evidence. Peter Strzok was in charge of both of these investigations, talking about an insurance policy to stop Trump. James Comey and his behavior. Kevin Kleinsmith.
Monologue.
Can you show me you speaking up? I'm like, wow, this is
monologue.
No?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I'm not representing that John Durham is God. I don't know what. So you're making it out that I'm painting to my audience that Durham is saying things. I'm telling you about, like, I'm asking you your preferences, your values, what you care about, and what you said. Right? You said these procedures are bullshit. And if you what you mean by that is they'll do nothing. They won't help at all. That's what I take bullshit to mean. Right? They're not really helping at all. And
no, when I say that it's bullshit is when the rubber meets the road and they feel like doing this again to someone they feel is a politician they don't like, that they'll do it. And then you'll say that's regrettable, and no one will go to jail, and they'll say, oh, our bad, we'll make some reforms.
Well, what would it take to what would it take? Is what you're saying literally unfalsifiable? So there's nothing I could show you that would make it so the procedures aren't bullshit. Is that fair?
Not you, because you're a bad faith hag.
But what evidence would it take to convince you otherwise from your position?
Prison for James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page.
So it would literally take, for what crimes, actually?
Maybe hang them for treason publicly.
For treason? So what's the definition of treason?
I don't have the legal definition in front of me, but treason to me. Go ahead. You know the legal definition?
Well, no. I'm asking you. Surely you meant something by it when you said it. Surely you meant something by it when you said it.
You don't know. Treason to me means attacking the country, including the legitimate leaders of them, trying to subvert them.
Trying to subvert the leader is what you take treason to be.
The country in general, the leader would be part of that.
Okay, so what?
That's not actually good. Trying to do so in illegal means.
In illegal means, trying to subvert the leader in illegal means.
Correct.
So I think by that logic, any leaker would be committing treason, right?
Sure.
Okay, you don't think treason means that, right?
Why not? The punishment for treason is only up to death. It doesn't mean that that's all.
Because no one uses it that way. Number one, and usually usually it means levying war. Which is also coextensive with some definitions of, by the way, insurrection, or it means giving aid or comfort to the enemies of the United States, which is a term of art meant to refer to foreign enemies, foreign adversaries. And then it could be like if you're leaking information to the Soviet Union, that absolutely could be treason. If for the purpose, right? There's an inherent betrayal, right? There's a betraying to another in the context of the foreign situation, to another foreign power. That's the betrayal, right? Or it's levying war against the United States.
I don't believe you. I don't believe that that's all the treason. Here's why. So if 10 people get together with a plot to assassinate Donald Trump to keep him from winning an election, but they're not doing so at the behest of Ukraine or Russia, then it's not treason?
So if they're just doing it by themselves, it would be assassination. No, it wouldn't be treason unless they're levying war.
Led by Senator Warren and a bunch of other Democrats.
If it's sufficiently broad, it might be considered levying war, and then you're pushing on what levying war means. But usually that would be political assassination. So, for example, do you think that the person who tried to kill Trump was committing treason?
I don't know. I think that I would say that it would have to be more that they were involved with politics to subvert the duly elected leader.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like you should calibrate your definitions here before you start accusing James Comey of treason, dude.
That's true. I think that whatever definition of treason I would come up with, that intentionally trying to target, imprison, leak against the guy that you thought was going to win presidency, and then after he won presidency, meets the definition of treason.
Leaking against leaking
in the system to subvert him to get his political opponent's benefit.
So doing any kind of legal action any kind of illegal action against a political rival would be considered treason?
No, I think if you're in a position of power, like James Comey, the head of the FBI, or Peter Strzok, head people at the FBI, who are intentionally trying to get an insurance policy to subvert the will of the people, to imprison, to leak against, to hamstring the elected leaders of this country, then that is treason.
Yeah, okay. I think that you should clarify your definition here, and
You can quibble
I
with the
think
definition. I don't give a shit. I'll admit,
yeah.
off the top of my head, I don't know that it's the best definition. I think that James Comey committed treason. I think they all did. I don't give a shit with people like you that were for the lawfare. I don't care that you're going to say, no, I believe the FBI with all these people. I've gone through this with you a million times. Like the hoops that you'll jump through. Yes or no? Do you think when Kevin Kleinsmith took an email from the CIA saying basically, yeah, Carter Page worked for us and changed it to no, he didn't. Why do you think he did that? What's the best explanation?
I'm so based on what the judge said and based on everything.
Who was the judge, by the way, real quick, you know?
It's some district court judge. I don't know.
Was it Boasberg?
I don't know. I might have been. I'm not sure.
It was, wasn't it?
So you think Boasberg is some Democrat hack?
Well, I think that we could see that through the history of the Kleinsmith thing and now through a pattern of claiming jurisdiction when he blatantly didn't have it when it came.
So he absolutely had subject matter jurisdiction. He didn't have venue. He had jurisdiction. And the courts have confirmed, by the way, that the Supreme Court has confirmed, for example, in the Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia case, that the courts have jurisdiction over that case. And so it just isn't the case. I mean, they've lost in the jurisdictional cases.
Explain to me the difference between venue and jurisdiction.
Yeah, sure. Jurisdiction relates to whether or not the court itself is empowered to hear those kinds of claims, right? So it's subject matter jurisdiction is different than like statutory venue, which is basically in which of the many of this type of court you have to bring it. So in the context, for example, of civil litigation, there's the venue statute, which says, even though other courts might have subject matter jurisdiction. So, for example, federal courts generally have subject matter jurisdiction over cases that rise in diversity jurisdiction, or that raise federal issues. Notwithstanding the fact that the federal courts have subject matter jurisdiction in those areas, the statute on venue tells you that there's a preference order for where you're supposed to bring those cases. And for habeas matters, the venue statute specifies that it's in the place of incarceration. And then there's an additional holding from the Supreme Court, which is that any case involving the determination of an Alien Enemies Act can't be brought under the Administrative Procedures Act. It has to be brought under the habeas petitions, and therefore the venue was improper. But that doesn't relate to subject matter jurisdiction, as Boasberg laid out in his opinion.
So it's a lengthy explanation.
It's a correct one.
You could say that, but here's the question I'll ask you, right? What does the term jurisdiction mean?
It's different contexts. So there's personal jurisdiction, there's subject matter jurisdiction.
I understand there's different kinds. What does the word jurisdiction mean?
It usually implies at a broad level some kind of power over a thing. That's at a broad level, but getting more narrow.
So let's say that the question I'm going to have for you when you say subject jurisdiction and things like that, there's no such thing as venue jurisdiction?
No, it's just venue. It's subject matter jurisdiction is separate from venue.
I would think that that's not true. I could be wrong. I bet if I look this up that there is a term venue jurisdiction. And in other words, jurisdiction is basically saying when the court is empowered to have power over and hear.
Yeah, it has to do with like the inherent power of this court to do a thing, as opposed to which court.
The things that we would say that the court doesn't have jurisdiction is because the specific topic at hand, right? The subject, correct?
Usually the subject matter of the suit, right? Hence the term subject matter jurisdiction.
There could be other types of jurisdiction, such as the venue.
No.
In the right location to hear.
That's it. Are they in the right location, but not whether the court, its system itself, has the power to hear it in general, right? That's what subject matter jurisdiction refers to.
A court can have the power. For example,
because venues.
If I have these small claims here in Pennsylvania, right? California Small Claims Court doesn't have the power to hear that case. Although you may say, well, they absolutely have the jurisdiction to hear small claims.
They might not. Yeah, no. So certain state courts. Most state courts probably lack subject matter jurisdiction over those petty offenses in other states. And there would also be a venue problem and by the way, another term, personal jurisdiction matter. So there's
venue jurisdiction.
No. Why are you trying to fucking teach me, dude? You just got blown the fuck out. Subject matter jurisdiction and venue are not the same thing. Stop just fucking winging it, you idiot.
Okay, then we'll do this real slow. Explain to me why a California small claims court doesn't have subject matter jurisdiction over my small claim in Pennsylvania. Give me the reasons why they don't.
Yeah, because the enabling acts or enabling statutes of the courts in California, listen, I don't know how they're specifically set up. Those specific courts typically limit it to certain kinds of claims or controversies that occur within the state or residents of the state. And so you'd have to give me more facts before I knew for certain that it was deprived of subject matter jurisdiction.
So in other words,
wait. You'd have to give me more facts to determine, for certain. But typically the statutes that empower those small claims courts themselves, again, I can't represent California specifically. Every state's going to be different. They will not give them subject matter jurisdiction over things that occur outside of the state or over a certain amount of money.
Again, I love how verbose you are in this. It's a long way of saying because you're not in the state.
No, but sometimes that's not enough analysis, dude. Maybe you don't actually have all the facts here. So some courts, for example, are absolutely do have the subject matter jurisdiction. So, for example, like a New York State court might have subject matter jurisdiction to hear a certain contract gone wrong that was executed in a different state. It just depends on the doctrines related to jurisdiction in that state and venue. Yeah, so it's more complicated than that.
This particular thing is a contract dispute that I didn't pay the guy that mows my lawn $1,000. In Pennsylvania, we'll pretend that California says we can't hear that. Why can't California hear that?
A California court, why can't they hear
Correct.
the contract gone wrong?
Yes, for $1,000 for the mowing of my yard. Why can't they?
Yes. So what's that?
Because they don't have jurisdiction because their jurisdiction is limited by their own laws to these sorts of contract claims that occur.
Well, hang on a second.
Or in the state of California.
So, just to be clear, the Pennsylvania courts might have the California courts might give their courts subject matter jurisdiction to hear those cases, but it might be illegal to bring them in those cases because, there's no personal jurisdiction over the defendant in that case. Or because now it could be the case, for example, that there's sort of an inherent, geographical territorial limits on the power of California to extend its jurisdiction over other states' conduct. But it happens more than you think in terms of stuff that like generally happens in one location. Most of the stuff that happens in that location, but there's a sufficient contact, or even the people themselves consent to jurisdiction in the case of personal jurisdiction in some other place. But again, that's all to say it's not getting at the heart, which is venue and subject matter jurisdiction are different concepts. Any lawyer worth their salt will tell you that.
I understand that. No, and it's a nice straw man you're arguing against. Can you show me one time here where I've said that subject matter jurisdiction and venue aren't two separate things?
I think you're suggesting that there's such thing as venue jurisdiction.
No. Can you show me saying that? Can you show me?
Yeah, you said that. You said it was venue jurisdiction.
Right. So when I say jurisdiction, I'm saying that court that Boasberg did not have the authority to hear that because it was the improper venue. I used the term jurisdiction. You're like, no. He did have the right to hear the subject matter, just not the venue. You want to semantically say that?
No, it's not semantic, Rob. Let me explain why it's not semantic. It's not semantic because the argument that the Trumples want to put is no court can order U.S. officials doing things on foreign soils, which isn't what the Supreme Court held. That's what you want to bag, and you can tell by your geographical argument. What you want to imply to the audience and the people listening is the issue of jurisdiction or venue relates to the authority of courts in general to give orders to U.S. principals abroad. That's what you're trying to imply. And what I'm trying to say is, no, that's not it. That the courts generally do have, the Supreme Court held, authority to issue orders that affect the conduct of U.S. principals abroad. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is why
I didn't make that argument.
That's what you're implying.
What was obvious from the get-go was that everyone who remotely paid attention knew that Boasberg was not in the proper location to hear this case.
That is not true, Rob. Come on, give me a break. So that's not. So first of all, that was a divided Supreme Court that said that. Number one, the D.C. Circuit Court found otherwise, and this was a very narrow holding about the scope of the Administrative Procedures Act and certain precedent that went both ways on habeas petitions, where there were habeas petitions for non-custodial cases involving extradition, and whether that conflicted with a recent court decisions saying that habeas had to be where the relief sought was release from custody, but one was extradition. So this was like a complicated in the weeds case about what the meaning of the habeas venue statute was, whether or not the Administrative Procedures Act could apply in lieu of the habeas petitions. Again, because I don't know if you know this, but the habeas petitions were all amended out of the complaint. So by the time it hit the Supreme Court, there were no actual habeas petitions because they had all been amended out. And so it was a question about whether the Alien Enemies Act, whether that could be done under the Administrative Procedures Act. It's a lot more complicated than you think. And you're just winging it right now. And you look like a joke.
I'm not winging it.
Yes, you are.
Winging it. It was evident that this wasn't these. For example, the habeas claims were out of what, like Texas? That's where they were supposed to found them?
They weren't habeas claims. They said they had to be habeas claims. Supreme Court.
It was obvious that this guy, what had happened was, it's obvious to anyone who's paying attention what happened was this dude, fly of the moment, issued these orders while planes were in the air. The Trump administration had a reasonable claim that I think anyone who's reasonably looking at it, that this wasn't the proper location for these things to happen. But this guy issued these things immediately so that he can now hold them in contempt, which I bet the Supreme Court, if it gets to it, the Supreme Court's going to say, No, because you weren't the proper venue. You can't hold government officials in contempt for things like that. I bet that's the way that this
We'll
shakes
see.
down. We will see. And if it doesn't, you'll say, well, that's just a divided court. It wasn't blah, blah, blah. That's what my feeling is what's going to happen, right? It's clear that Boasberg has someone that has an axe to grind and has the political axe against Trump. He keeps randomly getting all of these cases where he keeps issuing these TROs. And we can see that previously he decided to say that Kevin Kleinsmith, what was the reason, by the way? Now that we know it was Boasberg. So getting back to that, why did Boasberg say? You say you're going to listen to Boasberg. What was Boasberg?
Whoa, what did I say? I'm going to listen to Boasberg no matter what. When did you say that? Come on, that's sneaky.
I didn't say that. I said you said you're listening to Boasberg. I didn't
What do you mean?
No
What do you mean you're listening to Boasberg? I'm saying.
You said.
I see what you mean. So what I'm saying is, so because I don't know, didn't see the trial of Kevin Kleinsmith, and because I don't know, what the judge said is that he thought it was more likely out of convenience that it happened. But again,
So
why are we doing this, Rob? Why the we always go every single conversation we have? It is fucking pathetic. Every single conversation we go down this exact line.
It is pathetic, right? Just so the audience understands what happens, Pisco's taking Boasberg's word as, well, the fact that this Kleinsmith guy, who was privately writing #resist whatever against Trump, he gets evidence from the CIA that says Carter Page, this dude they're getting FISA warrants on, actually did help the CIA. He changes that evidence to say, no, he didn't help the CIA. And the judge said, well, the reason we don't think that's a big deal and we could basically give you, what do you get, a year probation? He lost his law license for a year. That was it. Now he's back to being an attorney. He gets a slap on the wrist. And the reason is Judge Boasberg says, I think he did it out of convenience.
So you must have a big problem with all the Justice Department shit that's happening right now under the Trump administration version too, right? Where Trump is bringing people into the Oval Office to sign off criminal investigations himself directly into, for example, Chris Krebs. You think that you're fine with that? You're cool with that?
What does that have to do with the other?
Because of the political, because you're so concerned about the political interaction between the Justice Department and what's going on with the president, and so surely you have a problem, and you've spoken out against Donald Trump signing off on executive orders. Yeah.
No, wait. Now that you bring it up, I do.
Yeah.
I actually have a big.
It's
problem.
regrettable.
Listen. I was talking about this in show the other day. Remember when, like, Patel? They took it in front of the White House there. I forget the exact thing. But they got an email from the CIA saying one thing and they changed it to say the opposite.
Look at that. So listen. So in the one instance, we have someone who, like me, is good faith and is willing to say, yeah, this is wrong. It should be charged. It shouldn't happen again. In the case, broadly of the stuff that happened in the FISA context, but also the criminal acts of Kevin Kleinsmith. But you're just willing to be a government bootlicker. You're a government bootlicker, so you agree with the government, you just believe the government, and you just follow Kash Patel, you follow Donald Trump. And so when Donald Trump signs an order saying, criminally investigate Chris Krebs, the president directing the DOJ to do that, you're chill. You're totally fine.
What does that have one thing to do with the other? That's like okay, then I'll say, and you're chill with Destiny, your business partner?
Wait.
You're chill with it, right? You're chill with that, right? You're chill. Right?
So in the one instance, I'll tell you why it relates.
Can you explain why you were still working with Destiny after accusations? Can you explain why you were willing to?
So I'll tell you why it relates, right? So, and this is why you can tell he's cornered, right? Because he can't defend it, right? So in the one instance, you're decrying the double standard and you're saying how horrible it is that politics potentially infected the decision of Kevin Kleinsmith that to change the internal government source and say whatever, right? That is horrible. It's the worst political scandal. You said worst political scandal, among other things. And in fact, some of these people should be hanged for treason. That's on the one instance. But then Trump openly starting political investigations of people who called the election, it was safe and secure, and that nothing happened. You sleep. You don't give a about that or any of the other blatantly political actions, such as, for example, the Mayor Adams situation. I don't see you at all condemning that at all. So you're the hypocrite. You're the one with the double standard, and you're the one who really doesn't give a fuck about corruption or political influence on justice.
So let me explain what Pisco did.
Yeah.
He's getting blown the fuck out on the Boasberg thing with the conflict case. And so what he does is he does a complete red herring and changes something out. Now he says, is it okay to announce political investigations into your opponent? Which was not my... By the way, the standard's been set. The Democrats said absolutely. That's what we saw with the lawfare against Trump.
So you're okay with it. You're okay with it.
The point is,
you're okay with it. You're okay with it.
The point is, what we're talking about with Kevin Kleinsmith is a completely different scenario. He can't defend it. Pisco can't defend it.
Wait. I don't defend it. Wait. What?
Listen. I sit there and listen to you talk. So now you're going to listen to me. On one hand, he's saying, well, well, Trump had people and they're announcing going after political opponents. On the other hand, what we're talking about is the fact that this Judge Boasberg said that this guy, Kevin Kleinsmith, gets an email saying Carter Page worked with the CIA, factually changes it to the opposite conclusion that he didn't. And the judge says the reason he did that was, quote, convenience. Now, what would that convene? There's no good explanation for this. I've talked to Pisco about that. He can't defend it. He just blindly...
Wait, defend what? Defend Boasberg or defend Kleinsmith?
You can't defend...
Which one? Boasberg or Kleinsmith?
For this was convenience.
Boasberg or Kleinsmith?
You can't defend that the most likely explanation for this was convenience, which means...
Wait, why not?
Boasberg's conclusion.
So wait. So why not? If you're hoping to get these to do it so that it's not questioned, so you don't have to go through a process, and to not have to go up the chain and explain everything, why would that be inconsistent with the facts?
Because convenience, when we went into this, it also implies, and what Boasberg was implying, isn't that he was intentionally doing this to sabotage. He's saying that it was a mistake. That he in his heart, and you said this, that in his heart, Kevin Kleinsmith thought that email from the CIA was wrong.
Well, wait.
Instead of reaching back, let me finish. Instead of reaching back out to the CIA and saying, are you sure? For convenience sake, he just changed it for them. If your argument is now, oh, no, Kevin Kleinsmith knew that he was falsifying evidence and he intended to lie.
No. No, I'm crystal clear. I'm crystal clear about what I said. And to be honest, I think that you have memory problems. Oftentimes I have to, we have a conversation and we go back and you accuse me of saying something. I said the complete opposite. And that's happened to you now multiple times. I think you recognize that. So what I said in that debate was crystal clear. I said, it could be the case that this is one of the reasons. It could be that it's openly political. It could be the case, and I'm legitimately telling you that it might have been political. I'm just telling you what the judge found and saying it's not inconsistent with the evidence. The evidence is consistent with that, right? It is not an impossible situation. You agree with that, Rob? It's not logically impossible. It's not.
It's almost. It is beyond all possible doubt impossible. And
okay.
You'll
Why?
notice what I said there was that that's what Boasberg's conclusion was.
Okay.
I didn't say what Pisco. Yes, I'll admit that one of the things you say every time we talk about this is, well, any one of a million things is possible. I'm not saying that this is definitively, but if it's possible that
why is it so ridiculous? Why is it so ridiculous? Tell us.
Because the idea, so when we say ridiculous, notice you changed the subject there. Are you saying that Boasberg said that convenience to Boasberg meant that he truly believed that the CIA was mistaken? And
that he considered, I understand Boasberg, and I'll double check the order or his sentence or the sentencing, whatever he said at sentencing. But I understood Boasberg to say that he didn't think that he was incorrect. He thought the email was incorrect or something like that. That's what I understand Boasberg is saying. But my question for you is, why is that so ridiculous that you dismiss it out of hand and such that Boasberg is corrupt?
I just want to be clear. So that's the two separate scenarios. The other, because it seems like the way you were framing it there previously is, no, convenience just meant, right, that there's a question of, did convenience mean he didn't want to go back to the CIA because he thought they were wrong? Or is it that, because it sounds like what you were saying, well, for convenience, what it really was he really wanted this warrant, and it would be more convenient to just change that to get the warrant. Because you understand that latter position, it's going to help.
No. So convenient in terms of going up the ladder. Did you hear me say that?
Yes.
To re-clarify the fact at issue, which is whether or not he's spoken with another government agency. I think OGA or whatever. In this case, I think it was the CIA. But again, why is it so ridiculous? Why is it? Look at what we're doing here, Rob. We're here again. Why are we here again? Why are we in Kleinsmith every single time?
Why is it that all these people are connected all the time to these things? Secondly, it's showing that once more, you didn't care about things like due process as they occurred. You didn't care with the slaps on the wrist. You didn't care that no one was
where's the denial of due process there? Where's the denial of due process?
Let me finish. It's not just due process in this situation. The denial of due process was Carter Page.
Wait, how was Carter Page denied due process?
Because the government intentionally misled the FISA court to be able to spy on him and take away his Fourth Amendment rights. Yeah,
but you agree that I've said that that's wrong and it shouldn't have happened, right?
You said it's regrettable. Yeah.
Wait. So how am I covering for it?
What I'm saying, because how am I covering if I say that they do to Garcia, they do?
Yeah, but I mean it. I don't know. Do you mean it? I mean it. Do you mean it?
You can say that. I don't believe you. That's why this is
I mean it. I don't want the FISA process to be abused, especially now, right? Like right now, what do we have, right? Who's in power? One of the reasons why I'm against these violations, by the way, in practice, I'm a defense attorney. I do not think that it's good for the government to have these powers. One of the reasons is because I know that it can always be in the hands of the other party. And so if
you didn't speak up until after everything.
What are you talking about?
I don't believe you.
We were debating in real time.
I don't believe you, and I'm going to finish my point on the convenience thing. Now that we've talked about what convenience, yes, the fact that you're saying that it is within the realm of possibility, and that you accept this judge that's saying technically, this lawyer could have said, I asked the CIA this question. The CIA gave me the answer. I know that the CIA is wrong, but instead of re-emailing them and saying, are you sure about that? For convenience sake, I'm just going to commit a crime, which I know is a crime because I'm a top lawyer at the FBI. I will commit a crime, change the evidence to the opposite, and then submit it to the FISA court.
Well, that's not what happened, right?
That is what happened.
So so in this retelling, he's submitting like a falsified document as opposed to showing someone the screen, right? And that changes your sort of prior on whether or not.
Let me clarify. He wasn't the person who physically handed the documents to the FISA court. He
misled people. Yes.
He was handing the documents or showing the documents to the people that he knew would represent him to the
So what about that is why is it so ridiculous that someone where there's a timetable perhaps on the reauthorization of the warrant and just doesn't want to deal with it does something illegal in that context? Why is that so ridiculous?
The fact that you even have to ask that question shows how disingenuous you are.
Okay, so then you agree then that you agree that there is no explanation in good faith for why they deported Kilmar Garcia, even though he was granted withholding and removal, right?
What? I'm sorry. What does that have anything to do with the topic at hand?
I'll tell you why. Because I'll tell you exactly why. Because you're saying that there's nothing that would explain such a gross violation of the conduct in the law for someone to change an email in that context. So my question is, why would it be the case that there would be a justified or innocent explanation for why Kilmar Garcia was deported? If it was it's so obvious you're not allowed to deport someone who's under withholding order, and the government admits that they knew that he was under a withholding order.
Because it's two apples to oranges situations. One is they admit, oh shit, we missed that there was this withholding order. We saw the previous order. We had an empty seat. We saw a plane that was going to El Salvador. We said, let's deport him. That's different than if they would have physically taken the judge's order, changed the order to say, we reject the order, the withholding order, then sent him. I want to ask you right now, if they had done that, if Trump's administration had literally retyped up the withholding order that said he couldn't be sent to El Salvador and changed it to say, yes, he can be sent, would you say, oh, it could just be a mistake of convenience? They thought that. Is that what you would have given them? You would have said, oh, yes, that's sort of, I could see that.
Yeah, we would need an investigation, wouldn't we?
Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say. There seems to be contemporary evidence that he actually thought that was the case. That's what the judge was relying on. That's what there was other email communication that I think Boasberg referred to at the time, which indicated the present state of mind of him, that he actually genuinely thought that this person hadn't had that interaction. That's what Boasberg relied on.
That's sort of irrelevant.
Why?
Right. Once you have, I might think that you're really good at basketball, and once I get like a bunch of people saying you're not good at basketball, I'm not going to change and say, well, I believed he wasn't good.
Wait. Why is it irrelevant? Wait. Let me finish my question. Why are the contemporaneous statements that evince a particular state of mind as to a particular person irrelevant? So I'll give you an example why it would be relevant. So, like, let's say that Trump were saying at the time that he were bringing all those documents, I have the complete legal right to do this, and I know that I'm allowed to do this, or bring it back to the Her case, right? He said that he had the right to keep his diaries, at least for crimes where they're willful state of mind. Don't the contemporary statements of the person at issue? I'm not saying that you always agree with them, that you always, adhere to them, but it's not irrelevant. It's certainly some probity there. Is something there? It's not nothing.
No, this would only be a comparison that would be apt if Smith's contemporaneously saying, I thought that I was allowed to change evidence. That's not what's happening. So with Trump, you're saying, well, wouldn't his state of mind be necessary when he said, I thought I was allowed to take those documents? That's one issue. That's not what Smith's saying. No one's claiming that Smith's saying that. Smith's saying something completely different. In your words, do you think Smith knew he was breaking the law when he changed that evidence?
I think he probably knew, yeah.
Okay, so then his feeling contemporaneously, no matter how strongly it may have been, that I don't believe Carter Page ever worked for the CIA. When the CIA directly says, yes, he did work for the CIA, for him, a top lawyer at the FBI, to knowingly break the law.
Wait, no, he broke the law, but that's the thing. This is an issue of sentencing. It's not an issue of. So I want to be clear to the audience. He was found guilty. This is a question of this is a question of sentencing.
Right, and we're talking about why the sentence was so light. And
yeah, it's his first offense, and
accepting as a plausible explanation was that he did this out of convenience because he thought that the CIA was wrong. And so instead of emailing the CIA back and saying, whoa, are you sure? He just went ahead and committed a crime to change the evidence so that it would get submitted to the FISA court so they could continue spying on Trump's team.
Yeah, so like I don't know why it is unthinkable that Kevin Kleinsmith could have that state of mind. That's what I'm not following.
The charitability that you're willing to give the people that engaged in all sorts of egresses against the Trump administration is laughable. Consider the charitability that you're willing to give Trump.
No, okay. So I just want to be clear. Why is it so unthinkable?
It is unthinkable that a person at the top of the FBI's legal chain would knowingly break a law because they were so convinced that the CIA, they had to ask the CIA the question because they didn't know.
What if he thought he wouldn't be caught?
Well, then it wasn't out of convenience, then it's a different motivation.
Wait, no. No, if he did it for convenience and thought he wouldn't get caught.
It doesn't matter. He still knowingly broke a law.
Yeah, I agree. That's why he was convicted.
And given a slap on the wrist, which you're fine with the sentencing, correct?
I don't really have an opinion on it because I wasn't there in the case.
Sure. Why wouldn't you? Like, literally, I will guarantee you, if the exact opposite happens, and we have people in Kash Patel's office, right, that are changing evidence to have FISA warrants or something against Democrats, I'll guarantee you're reading that case. I'll guarantee you're following that.
So first of all, I don't follow every single Democratic, but in general, like this error, if it is an error, right? If this situation, the Carter Page thing, I just register in terms of its magnitude of harm on the country as much lower as you. I do agree with that. I don't think that.
Right.
So I think as a matter of course, but I want to be clear. I'm open about that. As a matter of course, there are warrants that are achieved and unlawful or overly broad or whatever, and it is bad when they do that 100%. But you're comparing that to the broad sale denial of basic contours of due process in the course of deporting people to a slave camp in El Salvador. That to me is wild.
No, that's one way to frame it. The other way to frame it is I'm comparing the highest levels of the FBI engaged in a systemic effort to cover up for one political candidate and to go as aggressively as possible after the second, including breaking the law to get FISA warrants to spy on them, to leak to the press. They knew before Brennan had a meeting, right, with Obama and all these officials that Hillary's plan was to link Trump to the CIA and this was their plan. They all went along with it. You just say, regrettable, not that big of a deal. Moving on.
But hang on a second. I've said it was...
Instead, we're comparing that to a person who's most likely an MS-13 member, a person whose wife had accused him several times of assault, a person who was an illegal, who lived in this country since 2011 and never filed for asylum until he was caught in 2019, a person who was from El Salvador, a person who
monologue.
That's what I'm saying. That's what you're comparing. Literally the subversion of the highest levels of our government to one guy who's an illegal from El Salvador getting sent back to El Salvador.
Yeah, no. So it's obviously a broader policy than that because we're also talking about the Alien Enemies Act deportations and the entire, you want to talk about the problem with process, So hang on a second. I'm not done talking. I'll let you talk, right? I'll let you talk. So we're not just talking about one-off case, even though one-off case would be enough for us to be angry about it and be upset about it. Just like you're upset about this one case with respect to the Carter Page FISA warrants. We also talking about the Alien Enemies Act deportations, and the Trump administration is now saying we don't even need to get a warrant to go into buildings if we think there's an illegal immigrant there. And so you're concerned about due process rights and, about warrants and overreach by law enforcement, but you show no concern about that right now. And you show no concern about the political overreach of the Trump administration on all levels in the Justice Department, not just in terms of warrant decisions, but in fundamental charging decisions, and not just in charging decisions, in choosing to dismiss cases. Those are much more significant events than warrant decisions. So just to be 100% clear, the corruption now is so blatant in your face. They're not even trying to hide it, and you have nothing to say for it. And all the conversations boil down to this one situation where a government employee was actually charged and convicted of a crime, and that's your comparison. And you can't help yourself. But every single time we have a conversation about anything, it comes back to Kevin Kleinsmith and Carter Page warrants. It's pathetic, Rob. You have to admit it. Get over it.
It's not pathetic. And what it is, the mere fact that you say that it's regrettable, it's pathetic, get over it, shows that you
No,
never...
you're pathetic. No, you're pathetic.
There you go. Interrupting again. Shows that you were never concerned about those things in the first time, just like you weren't in real time. This is constant the playbook that you and other people that cheer for this corruption do. When it's occurring in real time, you pretend it isn't, or you ignore it. Then after the fact, when it no longer matters, you say, yeah, I guess that was bad. It was regrettable. Anyways, you set the stage. The Democrats set the stage for abuses like this, right? And so now you want to whine, wait a minute, due process. Just like today, we see the Democrats whining, oh my God, they're arresting judges. This is an authoritarianism. The same people that cheered on the lawfare against Trump, saying no one is above the law. The truth is, you can't defend this convenience excuse for Boasberg. We had a long discussion about it.
Oh my God.
Can't. Everyone could see how absurd it is. They can go back and watch our previous discussion to see it.
Go for it.
The reason it's important to bring these up is because it shows that you never cared about this, and so you want to use
so what you're doing, right?
And I can prove
every
it.
conversation grounds down to every conversation grounds down to every conversation grounds down to you're a bad person, you're inconsistent, you're a hypocrite.
Right now you're being bad faith.
Why?
And you know it. You want to know how I know?
Why?
So I never criticized Trump's Alien Enemy Act position?
Not substantively, no.
Really? I didn't have a conversation with you about this?
Wait. So you had a conversation with me about, I think that they should, you did, you said that it was bad. I think you did say that they should be given due process. Yeah.
Well, isn't that amazing? So wait a minute. So when we're talking about...
No, but I was referencing the Department of Justice stuff. I was referring to the DOJ stuff.
No, we're talking about this one specific case, which you were very clear has nothing to do with the Alien Enemy Act.
Yeah.
You say, well, this proves that you don't care about...
Wait, but this guy was also denied due process, Rob. Wait, Rob, this guy was also denied due process.
Please stop interrupting. Thank you. Completely ignoring the hour conversation I had with you not weeks ago.
Yeah, but hang on a second. For the Alien Enemies Act deportations, they were denied due process, and 9 justices on the Supreme Court, 9-0, found that he was denied due process. Kilmar Berger Garcia. Why would you have a difference in opinion in Kilmar versus the Alien Enemies Act deportations?
Because, I already gave you, I don't think you could hear. You accused me of misremembering things. I think you need to take a look in the mirror. Did I start off this conversation by saying that both I and the Trump administration...
Yeah, but you don't really think it's that bad.
Because I say it's regrettable?
Yes, you don't really think it's a big deal.
So if someone was to say it was
regrettable... But I just want to ask you, do you think it's a big deal?
No, not really.
Okay. So if they keep doing it, would you think it's a big deal?
I would think if it becomes a pattern that people keep having these withholding orders, they keep pretending that they didn't see it. But now I don't think that they're breaking the. I don't think that they're breaking the law. I think the term facilitates doing a lot of, right? They're not. What was the word? They don't have to starts with
facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador.
Right.
So, to be clear, if Trump keeps doing this, by the way, Trump is going to try to keep doing this, and he's already trying to keep doing this. He's trying to give them 12-hour notices before deporting them again.
That's completely different. That's
but it's not different. It's part of a pattern. They're trying to send these people to El Salvador without any rights. And what you're saying is, so I think it's wrong. I think this is all horrible shit. But you're kind of like, eh. And so why should if you're going to be
again, you can't be honest here. It's completely different. Saying that we didn't see a withholding order, that was our mistake. If they do that thousands of more times, I would be like, yeah, bullshit. You just accidentally. That's different than making a legal argument like, we think due process is that we give them 12 hours or 24 hours to find a habeas petition.
Yeah, so what's the pattern of anti-MAGA FISA abuse?
We can see the pattern of the abuse from the FBI and the lawfare from institutions like that.
No, but specifically FISA.
Want to talk about? Well, FISA is just one part of it.
Well,
Wanna
so
talk
is
about
there
the rest?
evidence that the government is abusing the FISA process again against MAGA people?
We could see that it was a pattern that the FBI and unelected bureaucrats were constantly using their power to subvert the election of Donald Trump and to subvert
Oh
and
my
lie to his
God.
office, and to protect those that were against him.
Okay.
It's obvious. Pisco, every one of us know that if 1/10 of this happened on the other side, you and the Democrats would be marching.
What
in
are
the
you
streets saying
talking
the
about?
biggest
There's
political
80% times what's happening there right now, and you're blind to it. Like the Mayor Adams situation is one of the most corrupt things I've ever seen in my life.
It is not. What is
Yes.
it? Does the DOJ have the prosecutorial discretion?
Of course.
Okay, what's the problem then?
So it's a political declination decision, whether they have the power or not. Just like don't you agree? Like the things that we're most worried about is the abuse of power, right? In order to abuse of power, you have to have the power, and so
Give me your worst case scenario. What was this abuse of power? What was it?
So the abuse of power was to extract a political concession, namely the acquiescence and agreement on immigration policy, as was stated. They were going to drop the case, but they were only going to drop it without prejudice.
Okay, so that's it. They tried to get a political favor by dropping a case against Eric Adams.
What do you think about that?
Okay, would it be corrupt if?
What do you think
let's
about
say-
that?
I'll tell you what I think about it, but first answer this question.
Oh.
Would it be correct if they said, we're going to drop this case if you testify against Hillary Clinton?
I'll answer it, but first you answer mine.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. Now, answer mine.
If they did what? If they repeat it one more time.
If they said, we'll drop this case as long as you're willing to testify in this case against Hillary Clinton.
It will drop the case if you're willing to testify. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. No, right? Why would that be wrong?
But couldn't you make the argument that's for political benefit? They're going after a political opponent?
No, if there's a higher level of criminality or leadership from one person, then it would be fine, right? You would agree with that?
The point I'm trying to make is, right, like that these sort of concessions are given all the time when the DOJ, the FBI, thinks that they could get something that would benefit them more, that they decline to prosecute people.
So are you okay with what happened? Then I'll ask with Mayor
I
Adams.
don't think it's that big of a deal.
Are you okay with it?
I'm okay with it by saying it's regrettable. It is about on the scandals compared to like the FISA abuse.
Was it bad at all?
It's about 1/1000. What we're talking about
is it net bad at all? I want to know that. That's why I'm asking you the question more directly.
Sure, it's slightly bad.
Okay.
Right. It's on the fact that you want to say it's one of the most grotesque political scandals. Meanwhile, we have people at the FBI openly saying that they have insurance policies to go after Trump, that are changing evidence to go after, that we have the IG saying he was shocked. That the most shocking thing was actually that they never verified the claims in the Steele dossier to get the FISA warrant. And then when they finally went to the suspected Russian spy Igor Dushenko to verify the claims, he basically told them, oh, this was all bar
So do you understand a little bit?
And what they told the FISA court was, we talked to the primary subsource and we think he's telling the truth. And what they left out, just like you do this all the time, they left out, and what he's telling the truth about is he says that this is all a joke and he can't verify any of it. They left that part out.
So you've yet to sort of point me to that specific, whatever that exchange was, but and maybe I'll pour over the IG testimony. But this is one of the things, right? Like here we have a situation where a mayor is indicted according to all the precedent of the DOJ in terms of when to bring cases against political figures. The administration does not say that it was an improper prosecution, right? They're not saying that it was done for political reasons. They actually say that it was done for proper reasons. They say, in fact, they're unwilling to say that it was a weak case. By all accounts, it's a very strong case. Everyone kind of agrees that the mayor is corrupt as fuck. Mayor Adams is corrupt. And notwithstanding the fact that the Department of Justice says it wasn't a political prosecution, notwithstanding the fact that the Department of Justice says there's not a substantive problem with it, they're going to drop it. And they're going to drop it because of the immigration.
Misrepresenting what the Trump administration said. They didn't say, we just did this all for politics. What they said was that their concern is that Mayor Adams was targeted because of politics. That what happened was once he started to show signs that he criticized during the election season illegal immigration in New York, that's when he got targeted. And that the targeting was happening at a rapid pace that was designed to take place either during his election season or right after it, so it would be hanging like an albatross over his head.
I encourage you to read the opinion of his name is, oh my god, now I'm not remembering it. Judge Ho in this case. I encourage you to read it. It's a shocking state of affairs what happened.
But I'll read it. You send me a link, I'll read it. But it's not like the Trump team said. They had reasons, right?
They brought him on Fox in the morning, just like you always point to Chuck Schumer, 6 Ways of Sunday, whatever. They brought Mayor Adams, paraded him in front of Fox and Friends, and they were like, yeah, and if he doesn't agree with us, we're going to have to come back and see about that prosecution. That's Tom Homan saying that.
Yeah, but Homan wasn't involved in that sort of prosecution, one, so he could say what he wants. Secondly, even if
Schumer wasn't involved in the fucking visa warrant process. What kind of comparison is that?
But there's two different areas here. Schumer's talking about a propensity for the politicians to have to be afraid of the bureaucrats. Tom Homan's talking his opinion on.
He's the border czar. He's talking immigration policy. He has the ear of the president. He's involved. He's a part of the executive branch.
So is it possible?
Oh my God.
That Homan said, listen, is it possible that Homan wasn't involved in any of these discussions and said this because he wanted to scare the shit out of Eric Adams?
Is it logically possible? If by possible you mean logically possible, yes, it's logically possible.
Well, I would say it's more than logically possible. Like if Homan, let's assume for a second that Homan wasn't in the loop with prosecutorial decisions, which we have no evidence that he was, right? So if he's not in the loop, right, could you see that it would logically make sense for him to be like, oh shit, we're going to get now.
Yeah, I agree. It logically makes sense. I agree it makes sense, Rob, because that's what transparency it looks like. Because it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck. And everyone kind of understands it. And I think that you have the presumption to rebut it, but I think you're conceding that even if it were true, this were explicit quid pro quo for immigration policy favors versus non-prosecution, you're saying that it's a low register big deal, right?
That's right. So I was going to say the second portion of that. Let's assume all that's true. I still don't think it's a big deal. Like to me, like I'm sorry, I missed the second point. The third point is I don't think it's a big deal. The second point is two things could be true simultaneously. He could have been targeted for political reasons and basically for political reasons been left off the hook. Right?
Okay. But I don't have evidence that he was targeted politically.
Well, I know, but that's what the Trump administration's saying.
But they're wrong. And even their own... Yeah, but no. But even in their own, they're unwilling to say it was a political prosecution, bar none. I mean, they're saying like there's questions about the timing and stuff, but all of that is bullshit given the Department of Justice precedent.
You tell me if I'm wrong. My understanding from the reading of the person's letter that wrote that,
he gave two reasons. So the first reason he gave had to do with like certain timing aspects of things that raised questions, but he's unwilling to say it was a political prosecution. And
to me, what he was saying was that like because Trump administration is going after sort of political prosecutions, that's a big mandate that they had, that we're going to put this on hold until we could make sure that this wasn't political because it has the earmarks of a political prosecution.
Yeah, no, it wasn't in such emphatic terms, and it's basically there was one of the head of the SDNY people after he left the SDNY. He had like some because he's running for something, I don't know, and he put something on his website and they cited that. It's all a bunch of garbage. I have to bounce in a second.
Yeah, I'll just
I do want to say I want to say one thing. I usually like the discussion with you, Rob, but it is annoying every time we have a conversation that we got to go back to Klein-Smith. We got to go back to Russiagate every single time. Not because I'm unwilling to have the conversation. I've had these conversations so many times with you every single time. And so when you like a little bit upset, yeah, I took the sign debate. One of the reasons for sure is because he's a bigger new audience. One of the reasons for sure is because I think like I'd have more access and we can schedule your debate later. And because I think it's novel. Another reason is I know these debates get every single time strung out in the same facts and all the time. And so that's boring.
Allow me to retort.
Yeah, go for it.
Right? One, I'm not mad at you for this Stein thing. As I've already said, it's more of an issue with modern day debate. So I don't give a shit that you took a debate with Alex Stein. Fine, whatever. Secondly, the reason that these things get brought up over and over again is because, predictably, as I was saying at the time that these were occurring, if the other side gets power and starts to do what you think are political prosecutions, breaking the law, etc., you will scream bloody murder. But the truth is you don't give a shit. You don't. Based on the blatant corruption at the highest levels of the country, that was easy for everyone to see that you defend over and over. You will only make concessions on the most obvious of things like Klein-Smith. Okay, I guess he was guilty because he was found guilty. He was given a slap on the wrist because The judge thinks he just did it for convenience. I'm willing to accept that, fine. But when we go nitpickingly through all the other stuff, every single time you'll make excuses. So, for example, why didn't they prosecute Paul Gambetta for destroying subpoenaed evidence? You're like, well, that's just prosecutorial discretion, and what can you do? We've had this discussion. The pattern is unmistakable. They went as hard as possible after Trump, as easy as possible after Hillary. It's unmistakable. And the fact that you defend that means that I don't give a shit when you're now howling, but wait a minute, like, oh my God.
Is the issue whether you give a shit? I mean, who cares? I mean, I want an issue on the merits.
Garcia guy, you're screaming about him.
Who's debating whether or not you give a shit in the sense of like what?
Let me finish. So the point is, the reason that I constantly bring these things up is because when I talk to you, you're constantly like, OMG, Trump's like the biggest criminal ever, dude. Oh my God, it's like so bad legally, the stuff that Trump's doing, dude. Which then begs the question, okay, so you're doing exactly what I said you would do. You're freaking out about legal issues now, but when it was your side in power, you were all for it.
Even if I were to grant that, Rob,
the last thing I'll say is the fact that you want to say debating me is boring because this, that, and the other. That's fine. You could say that, right? However, I think that it would be interesting for you to take a look at what people say about when you debate. Because it turns out that a lot of people that are in more reputable spaces find you to be an insignificant, smug little prick that can't help but annoy, interrupt, scream, curse, and swear the entire time. It's the behavior that you see on X. Mm-hmm. It's the little shit you do, like reposting yourself constantly, starting new threads, going after people. You can call me whatever you want. We're debate bro type people. I don't give a shit. Going after people that aren't in that space. You're a coward, blah, 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 blah. Then when you get on those spaces, like when you're in a space like with Laid Back Lawfare, the entire fucking chat's like, we can't stand this Pisco guy. He's a sack of shit. He's not good faith. So before you point the finger and say because of the content
it's
of
different.
the argument makes it boring, just understand that many people find you to be an irrelevant.
I'm sure they do. Wait. I'm sure they do.
That's what you are.
I'm sure they do. And a lot of people find you to be completely overrated, a loser who can't get over. Wrong. Yeah, and just kind of a hack. And I think you're showing yourself to be a hack because even if you were to accept your framing of things that I really was in favor of corruption back in the day, and I really am now howling and crying wolf. You're in response. What are you saying? You're saying the cases that I'm pointing to aren't actual legitimate cases of corruption. You're saying it's different. It's different. It's different. It's different. It's different. That's your response, isn't it? It's different. It's different. It's different. No, wait, hang on. So for the cases that I'm talking about, like Kevin Kleinsmith, I'm saying, yeah, I'm glad he was prosecuted. And so but you're saying I'm defending that corruption. And or for example, with Paul Gambetta, where it's just in the weed discussions about what he knew it, and I'm willing to get into the timeline about Paul Gambetta, and I'm like, ultimately, I understand the DOJ's perspective here, not to prosecute Paul Gambetta. You're like, oh, you're defending the corruption. Where if the guy got prosecuted, like, what the f do I care? Why would it shatter my world to defend Paul Gambetta? It just, or even Hillary Clinton for that matter. You haven't asked me about it, but Letitia James, there's accusations right now about her. Do you see me defending Letitia James in terms of some of the allegations of the mortgage fraud situation? So no, and so I just don't think that you make your case that of many of the situations. And even if it were true, you're just doing what you accuse everyone else of doing. You're saying it's different. It's different. No, they're lying about this case, or it's not. It's fine that he's doing this. It's not corruption in this case. I'll just give you an example. With this situation, Mayor Adams, you said it's like 1%, like not even, like barely a tiny percent registers in the scale of corruption, even though it's blatantly like pay for play. It's blatantly, we'll drop the case in exchange for political favors. What could be more, getting to the core of your issues with the deep state than that?
Okay, to answer that, one, because the scale of it is so low. For example, if you would do that with a local mayor in my small town, would you say, oh my God, that's a huge scandal compared to...
For the president? Yeah, it's a big scandal.
Compared to the targeting of the president of the United States by the FBI.
Of one advisor, of one water boy advisor.
Let me finish, right? The entire targeting of Trump that we saw by the head of the FBI in 2016, we saw what the intel community was doing in 2020 with the Hunter Biden laptop.
Oh my God.
The pattern that you see of them over and over. Yes, the Eric Adams thing, small potatoes. Second, when you say you continue to report to these cases, You only brought up 2 cases this entire discussion.
What do you want to? We want to do Hunter Biden? What do you want to do, Hunter Biden?
Let me finish. You brought up 2 cases. The first was Eric Adams, which I admitted probably does look like some small level of
Corruption.
Pay for play,
Yeah.
which is a small level of corruption, which I'm sure is a pittance compared to not just what we see with the lawfare against Trump, but all sorts of campaign, like, for example, like blatant corruption.
What about the Chris Krebs? I didn't see you talk about Chris Krebs.
I don't know about the Chris Krebs situation.
Well, the president is in the Oval Office saying, investigate this guy. Sign executive order. If Biden had done that with anybody, can you imagine?
I have not seen anything about it.
Okay. I'll send you
that. Is he allowed to do that if Chris Krebs committed a crime?
Well, yeah. Well, is the president allowed to target Joe Biden, or is Joe Biden allowed to target Donald Trump with lawfare? Is he allowed to do that?
Can.
Well, I'm asking you, would that be a good response? Is he allowed to?
The standard has been set.
Well, so now you're playing into the same standard that you're accusing others of. Wait, so you're guilty of that standard, aren't you?
No.
Oh.
I'm not. Just like when your boy Bessie went on Piers Morgan and refused to condemn the assassination attempt of Trump, and you accepted his argument, which was, I'm not going to listen to that from you.
I didn't.
I'm not going to listen to people like you.
I didn't, by
that
the
were
way.
okay with the standard being set, demanding, will you denounce the standard? Not going to listen to you. I don't owe you that, right? The other thing I was going to say is, right, when you look, like specifically when you say like, oh, you're unable to defend, like, all this stuff, like, it's so blatant what occurred here, the corruption against Trump and the magnitude of it, that you're willing to defend it. Then when you come on and you say, well, there's cases, I brought up these cases, and you're just saying, well, that's different, blah, blah, blah. You only brought up 2 cases, which was the Eric Adams.
I got more.
And you brought up the Garcia, which I admitted from the outset. Yeah, the Chris Krebs,
okay.
I just admitted, you talked about it for 3 seconds. I don't know anything about
how about the fact that
how do you want me to comment on it?
Okay. So how about so the Trump administration is now in the process of targeting people for First Amendment violations and denying people, imprisoning people because so for example, Mahmoud Khalil, I'll give you another example. What they're doing with the universities, they're targeting universities because they've housed certain anti-Israel speech. That's corruption. Just by the way, you blew a gasket. No one can hear. Rob, you're cutting out.
Okay. So Khalil's in prison.
Khalil is in prison right now. Yeah.
He's in prison.
Well, he's in jail. He's in holding. He's in detention.
So he's not in prison.
Well, when I said prison there, I meant he is being detained in a cell that is indistinguishable from a jail cell. He's in a jail cell.
What's the punishment that he's looking at? Imprisonment?
When you say punishment, what do you mean by that? Are you using a legal term, punishment?
Let's say he loses his case. What's going to happen to him?
He will have his green card revoked and he will be removed from the country.
So he won't be sent to prison?
He will not be sent to, he will not have criminal imprisonment. That's correct.
Oh, okay. So then what you're saying is Trump's targeting people, let's assume that you're right for free speech, to deport them.
Correct.
American
but not just deportation. Yeah.
Okay.
You're fine with that.
So when you said imprisonment, that was a bit much.
No. So I take imprisonment in the colloquial definition. People will use that term. Just to be clear, when people use that term colloquially, they will often use it in broader cases than the literal prison, which is like for long-term detention. So I don't, and if you look it up.
Khalil get out of jail right now if he would say, yeah, you're right, deport me?
Probably not. No.
I think he could.
He couldn't. It would take days. It would take days to process. So no.
Oh, well, that happens all the time.
So moving on, right? So you blew a gasket at the notion that the Department of Justice was like going after people who protested certain school situations or, Christians or something like that. And now they're like literally depriving schools of funding and going after schools, going after law firms, going after news organizations because of their, political opinions. And you don't have shit to say about it. You're fine with it.
That's not true. Again, I already talked to you specifically about the Khalil situation. You're lying again to your audience.
Yeah, you don't really care about it.
Did I or didn't I not talk to you about the Khalil and said, geez, I have problems with this? No.
Well, you seem to think that good logic was right? You seem to think good logic was right.
Since you're going to be disingenuous and lie to your audience, I'll clarify, and then you can admit that you're wrong or say that I'm lying. We had this conversation, and I said, the problem I have with the Khalil situation is I don't know a lot of the facts. There's a lot of accusations he did more than just speech, such as accusations he lied on his visa, accusations that he was involved in trespassing or physically stopping people from egress to get to public grounds and things like that. Those seem to rise to the level of crimes that would be different. But I'm operating under the assumption that the reason that this guy was targeted was because he said harsh things about
And you condemn it.
And I have a huge
Do you condemn it?
I'm not going to listen to you. This is another thing you do. Do you condemn? Do you
Yeah,
condemn?
do you?
Condemn? You're interrupting me in the middle of this. If you had listened to the previous conversation I had with you, you would already know the answer. But instead, you can't recall that because you're so
No, because you said good logic blew me out, right? You said good logic blew me out, right? So you don't agree with that anymore.
Good logic did blow you out,
So,
right?
but we were arguing about Khalil, and so isn't it a fair thing if you're saying good logic blew me out? I have to take that he blew me out on the Khalil discussion that we're having, and so in what sense would it be fair to say? So you think good logic was wrong or right, or that he blew me out and was wrong?
If you would let me finish my thought and listen to the previous things I said to you, maybe you would have an answer to your question before you start screaming, do you condemn? Do you condemn? Do you condemn? So you ready to listen to me?
Yeah, I'm ready.
As I said previously to you, although there may be legal justifications, for example, maybe it turns out that he did lie on his visa application. I think it, to me, feels like he was specifically targeted because he said harsh things about Israel. And I think if he would have said harsh things about Christianity or about France or about Palestine or about Canada or about the US government, I don't think he would have been targeted. So I have a huge problem with this and other sort of framing of like tiptoeing around. They brought this rabbi or whatever in Congress and said it's not enough to be, to not be anti-Semitic. You have to be anti-Semitic. Yes, it is a huge problem that I have with the Trump administration that I think when it comes to one particular country, that they're trying to set the stage for their harsher punishments for criticizing it than others. Having said that, I still have questions about the legality of what they're doing because I think that the rights to free speech are not the same when it comes to immigrants as they are when it comes to citizens. So I think that good logic is right on the legality of the argument that he had with you and legally what Trump's allowed.
We should go over it.
And what the judges think. My guess is what will happen will be that, like I said from the get-go, that the courts will basically say, you have to have some sort of bright line. So you have to have an expectation where people know, here is the line I can't cross. So the Trump administration can't lock someone up and then in retrospect say, here's the thing you said. They have to make it clear if these are for example, if they would say, if you burn the American flag and you're on a green card, we could deport you. The courts may allow that, but they would say that that has to be done beforehand. That's my interpretation of what will happen.
Okay.
So so when you misled your audience and said,
no, I don't think it's misleading.
Complained about it, you're full of shit.
Yeah, I can explain why. Do you want me to explain why or no?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so when you said that good logic was blowing you out, I take that to be what you're suggesting is that you're convinced that what's going on with Mahmoud Khalil is legal.
I think that the Supreme Court will uphold his removal. Yes.
Okay, so in that situation, I do take that to be kind of an anti-Khalil stance, and that would be like for me, for example, saying, I condemn what Kevin Klein-Smith did, but I don't think it's a crime. And you would, so even if I said that, you'd be like, oh, you're sweeping. That's what you say. You would say.
No, what I'm saying, there's a difference between me saying whether I want something to happen and think it's a good thing and whether or not it's legal.
I agree there's a difference there, but what I'm telling you is one of the big components of this discussion is, in fact, whether or not Mahmoud Khalil has rights at all, rights at least in the First Amendment context. And we can even go past that to say, like, I don't see you making that much of a muss about the same rationale being applied to universities, being applied to,
So now you moved on to another.
No. I'm not. So I'm not moving on. So in terms of your willingness to call out corruption, would you say that what's going on with Mahmoud Khalil is corrupt?
No.
Yeah.
I would say it's selective. I guess it depends on how you define the word corrupt.
I guess that's right. Yeah, I didn't really have. Yeah, I guess you're right about that.
I'll say it in my own words. I think that it's targeting that's unacceptable.
Okay.
I think that the idea that we target people based on criticism of Israel is unacceptable.
I also think that what happened with the FISA warrant process was unacceptable.
But the difference is the massive scale of these two things. The people who watches The Watchmen, the people in our law enforcement, in the strongest law enforcement agency in this country, also intel agency, weaponized wholeheartedly to go after one president and to defend his opponents. That's what we're talking about compared to nuanced discussions about the rights of immigrants and different scales of them and the things that they could say. right? I think that, like, ultimately, Trump's within his right. If they, for example, would say you can't denigrate like races, any race, right? I, I'm skeptical of that. I feel icky about that. But ultimately, it's not a punish. Like, it's not like, I think good logic blows you out in this, where he talks about, like, it's not considered a punishment the courts have ruled to deport someone.
Oh, no, but that's just a reference to whether or not it's criminal or civil. Yeah, no, punishment is a term of art that refers to whether something's criminal or civil, but there can be First Amendment violations that don't relate to someone, whether something's criminal or not. So, for example, if you only give liquor licenses to people who are Jewish or people who are Republican, the First Amendment encompasses both free speech and religion, that would be a First Amendment violation, notwithstanding the fact that the denial of a liquor license is not a criminal sanction.
Right. I agree with that. But the point I'm trying to make is when you take that in context within sort of the arguments that Good Logic's making about the INA.
Yeah, so the INA, again, that's a statutory argument about, and again, I'm happy to walk through everything he's saying. The INA, I even suppose that the INA gave the broadest possible statutory authorization to deport anyone he wants for any reason. And that's the kind of hypothetical that I was setting up with Tim and him, and some of them bit the bullet, but he wasn't willing to. But let's say the INA said you can deport anyone you want for any reason. It would not contradict the First Amendment. So you couldn't deport someone just because they're Jewish or just because they're Christian, because the First Amendment gives rights to people who are in the country.
Right. We understand. Good logic acknowledges it. Yes, those are two different, like you said, just because they like orange juice or something like that. Right. Good logic says, of course, there are thresholds to that wouldn't accept. But if they could make a credible case that, I forget what the
it's facially legitimate and bona fide, and I gave them that so I gave them that legal standard, facially legitimate and bona fide. It's from a case, Kleindienst versus Mandel, that was incorporated in Trump versus Hawaii, and referenced in Trump versus Hawaii. That's the quote-unquote Muslim ban case. But that's a standard that applies to admissions decisions, not deportation decisions. It's saying that, at the point of admission, you don't have any procedural due process rights. You don't have any rights. And the country, if it wanted to, could deny access to Chinese people. And there used to be laws that excluded Chinese people from entering the country.
I think that I don't remember the specifics of Good Logic saying, but I think that the inverse would be true, that you don't get. Are you saying? I'll ask you, Blake. Are you saying that green card holders have the exact same First Amendment rights?
No, I'm not. But
okay, so then both you and Good Logic are falling into the same trap. Well, not trap really, but it's just a matter of threshold. You're saying, for example, if I say "Death to America," I hate, blah blah blah, and burn an American flag. There is no possible legal understanding of our Constitution that says that I could be deported.
No. This is what I say. So it's not based on the content of the speech that it makes a difference here. That the content rights, unless you can show me otherwise, unless there's any precedent or unless there's other ways to do it that have been acknowledged, and I don't see any, that the differences in First Amendment rights generally pertain to kind of edge cases of immigration enforcement. The one that I know about where absolutely they have less rights is in a deportation decision. Oftentimes you can bring in the racial discrimination context or even certain First Amendment contexts, it's cases where it's selective enforcement cases. They're really hard to win. It's really hard to win a selective enforcement case. So the prime example of that would be in like a criminal context. Let's say that you're a black guy and you're saying, this is the example you often use, Rob, which is he's jaywalking, right? He's jaywalking. And they never enforce it against white people, but they only enforce it this one time against this one black person, right? U.S. citizens can bring racial selective enforcement cases. They're really, really, really tough to win. But you can, in some cases, you can get rid of the case based on racial selective enforcement.
Okay.
So in this one case that I'm referencing, the people who were being deported, who were green card holders, tried to claim, or either green card holders or they were here legally, they tried to claim selective enforcement based on the First Amendment rights. And what the court said essentially is you can't bring selective First Amendment enforcement claims as an immigrant seeking relief from deportation. So that's one instance in which the rights are a little bit more limited for people who, in the context of the deportation proceedings, in the context of selective enforcement claims. That's one example, but I don't know of any others.
Here's the deal, because you're not going to be able. I think this is sort of an unprecedented case. I guess we'll see what the Supreme Court says.
Will.
If they disagree with you, will you admit that you're wrong?
About what? About what the First Amendment says?
If they say that no, you actually can deport people for speech, for the content of their speech?
I would disagree. I would say that the law is that the First Amendment does not protect him. That the law would be that.
Okay, fair enough. So then you would say that Trump's team had not engaged in illegal actions at that point.
Yes, according to the Supreme Court, they had not engaged, and the Supreme. And I just want to be clear that the Supreme Court says what the law is. Now, I can disagree with the court, just like you can disagree with the court, but in terms of the legality of it,
But what I'm saying is, I'm guessing that the Supreme Court's basically going to be closer to good logic than you,
Okay.
right? When they say that there could be removal based on content of speech, I think you're wrong. I think that they're likely to sort of split the baby and say, but there have to be some sort of bright lines given. That's my interpretation of what will happen. We'll see what the court says.
Okay.
However, the point that I'm trying to make is I go beyond that, and I'm not just talking about the legality, I'm talking about the morality. The morality is absolutely our country should be allowed to say, if you say shit that we think is anti-American and shit reasonably, then you get the fuck out. We should not be forced to accept someone in here because they have a green card that's like, yay, ISIS, kill all gay people, death to the blacks. Like, we should have the right to be like, you know what, you get out of here. We should have the right to do that. Of course, the problem becomes, what is the threshold? At what point do you say, well, wait a minute, they should be allowed to say Trump. They should be allowed to say screw the Republicans, but they shouldn't be allowed to scream death to America. And there's an interesting conversation of the morality, not the legality, but the morality of what we should accept. However, on the moral scale, I'm saying regardless of what the Supreme Court says, I think to me it seems evident that this shit's about Israel, which is repugnant. That's what, so I don't understand where your criticism of me is like, well, you're unwilling. These cases, you're unwilling. Like, again, I had a 2-hour conversation with you, unprompted, where I basically, the whole thing was like a love fest where I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. You even then went on to talk to Connor and other people. It's like, holy Rob's more on my side.
Yeah, no, so based on what you just said about good logic, I thought you had a difference of opinion. I thought you changed your mind.
I think that he's correct about the legality of it. But the point I'm trying to make is, the legality of it aside, I think that he's winning that legal argument.
Okay, we'll see.
But I have a problem. I think the court will go. I could be wrong. I think the court's going to go my way. Anyways, the point is, I do have to get going.
Yeah, me too.
The reason that it always comes up to this shit is because the level of corruption we saw, the magnitude, the blatantness of it, and the willingness for you to bury your head and only accept the most blatant things that come with the least possible consequences is why I don't take you seriously when we talk about this shit.
We're talking about water boys, Rob. Paul Combetta, water boy. Carter Page, water boy. All these people are water boys.
You obviously will have the last word.
Okay.
You're fucking chill, right? Like, and so when I see you hyperventilating about these things now, which are situations worth talking about, I don't take you seriously. Even in the context of this conversation, right? When we talk about like, okay, if we just want to deport 12 million that came under Biden, how long would that take? 16 years. Or we could spend trillions more on judges that we would train and get from somewhere. And so to me, the problem is people are losing faith in our system, rightfully so, because what we see is one side could say, we don't have to follow the law. We can bring in anybody we want, knowing that we could then hide behind the shield of the law and say, oh, well, then now get rid of those people. And so we're perpetually in this spiral where anytime a sort of globalist Democrat wins, they're able to open up the border and there's not a fuck all thing we could do about it. And then if we ever get back into power, you'll be like, well, sorry, it's going to take decades to be able to undo the damage that's been caused. People are losing faith in this system, and it's going to be worse and worse for people like you. Because as people lose faith, you're not going to get people like me that you might think I'm radical, but I'm quite reasonable. You're going to get the right-wing versions of Destiny, your boy, that are saying things like, well, the worst thing that could happen was that bullet not killing him. You're going to get the right-wing Luigi Mangiones. That's what's going to occur. That's the fucking game that's being
Wait, you don't think we already have the right-wing Luigi Mangiones?
It's not celebrated like the Democrats. 55% in a recent poll said that they think it'd be legitimate if Trump got assassinated.
I don't know about the poll, but I don't agree with it. I don't think Luigi's a hero, and I think it's bad. But I just want to say, I think a lot of these conversations feel like ritual conversations, and it's one of the reasons that I think a lot of people get exasperated is, double standards are all great to talk about, but we get ground out oftentimes into Russiagate and all that shit, and for a lot of people, I think their eyes glaze over, and they roll their eyes at me that I still entertain them. That said, I do find it interesting what you just said about immigration, where you're essentially suggesting. I don't know if you're suggesting. I'm glad you just said that you wouldn't be willing to break the law, but I kind of had to push at you a little bit there and prod you a little bit. I actually do think that if you're going to do a radical deportation policy, it's going to cost a lot of money. That's part of the reason why people are saying that needs to happen. It's going to cost a shit ton of money, even if there were no due process.
It would not cost that shit ton if Congress would do their job and just say, yeah, asylum no longer applies. We don't give a shit. No orders withholding. Send everyone back. Sorry.
No, even just grabbing millions of people is going to be billions of dollars.
Well, yeah, that will cost money, but the idea of it having to take decades because we can't send people back.
Yeah, but minimum due process is necessary, because if due process is not given, and even in the situation that, like, imagine that we got rid of asylum and we got rid of withholding and we got rid of the Convention Against Torture and we got rid of all this stuff, you would still need some minimum due process to make sure that everyone is deportable as alleged in other circumstances, because we don't want.
Are you legal? Are you from this?
Yeah. So don't you have a right to prove whether or not you're here legally or not?
Shouldn't take long. Maybe.
It actually does take long sometimes. It actually does. So I'll give you an example. Right now, the Trump administration, there's one case, I actually don't know the name of it, where the government is unable to make a representation about whether someone is here legally or not. So oftentimes it's very complicated whether someone is removable.
What's the claim that he might not be illegal?
The specific person, it's a student. It's a student situation, whether they're here legally or not.
Okay, but because they overstayed a visa, is it that type of situation?
Because whether or not they rescinded it currently or didn't rescind it, or there may be some facts about whether or not they're in fact the person. You know, all these issues come up, Rob. I actually don't know the specifics of that case, but
sure there'll be edge cases where those things happen that might take a week or two to sort out. But yeah, the situation, once there's no longer a claim to say asylum, it'll be pretty easy to prove whether or not
to deport
you have
20. No. Even then, just like. People will have the right to contest their removability. That's what due process means. So,
right, they have the right to contest it, but the only thing they'll have the right to contest is, are you a citizen here or not?
No. They could say, are you overstaying a visa or not? Did you cross the border illegally or not? Are you inadmissible or not? Are you removable or not?
Prove that you have a visa that's. Oh, you can't prove it. Okay, you're gone.
Yeah. So the burden of proof is on the
person.
The government. The government is.
No. Well, then let's change that in the law too.
Okay.
Sure. Why not?
All right.
I would vote for that too. Get these. Look, the people that the truth is, bad faith pricks like you wanted the country in flooded with all these illegals, and you'll do everything possible to ensure.
You guys are going to bankrupt our country. You're going to spend $1 trillion on this.
I don't give a
super
shit.
stupid.
You bankrupted our country by encouraging this shit from occurring in the first place.
It's not bankrupting our country. Don't be crazy.
You can't do some horrible thing and say, well, we're going to ignore the law and we're going to bring all these people in and gaslight the people that we're not doing it, that it's not an open border. And then we really do want to secure the border. But, now that the other party's in power, we're going to use every legal means to assure they can't be deported.
Follow the law, you mean. Follow the law. I just want to follow the law. Like Trump has.
You can say that. You don't.
Yeah, I do.
You don't want to follow the law. You don't.
When do I not want to follow the law?
You want to hide behind the law when it allows the political outcome that you favor.
And when do I not want to follow the law?
When it doesn't favor the political outcome that you favor.
So name one instance when I said you shouldn't follow the law.
When it mattered, you didn't give a shit that there was this political lawfare going against Donald Trump.
Well, some of it I don't characterize as lawfare. So for example, his indictments, I don't characterize any of those as lawfare. I think they're all based.
And the actions of the FBI believe. I gotta go.
All right, man. Hey, good shit. Good talk.
All right, we'll see you, man. Yep.
All right, peace out. Space is ending. It's all over. I love you guys, even the haters. Oh my God, he's cooked. Sorry, folks. Every conversation, bro. Wild. Rob is emblematic of a lot of conversations I have with MAGA. Talk policy for a while, then when it gets triggered, it gets personal character attacks and whatever kind of stuff. Well, his whole thing is you're inconsistent. You're a hypocrite. You don't actually care. And I do concede on a lot of stuff with respect to it's bad to do the wrong procedures for FISA. He blows it out of proportion. It's like one advisor to Trump, a water boy, and it was wrong to do, and the people were held responsible. But the part which I think we should do well, maybe it should be the intro. I don't know, because I think I want to post that debate for sure. When he's trying to define treason, it's just laughable. He hasn't even looked into. Oh, the other thing was the subject matter, jurisdiction, and venue was so bad for him. Humongous wins. I mean, he just looked like a fool. And you can tell when he's getting a little, he doesn't like it. But yeah, no. A big thing is the double standard part to it.